Welcome everyone to the Score Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Boone, the lead fantasy analyst at The Score, and today's episode is presented by Subway, who now deliver so you can get back to the game. We are officially a month into the fantasy season. Now it's time to start taking stock of our teams. Now it's time to start making some moves, try to set yourself up for the next stretch of the fantasy calendar, and I talked about it on Monday. I'm looking at it in 4-game segments here. So we got through the first month. Now we're headed into the second stretch. And today we're going to bring on a great guest to help us figure out what moves we can be making, to help us preview week 5. It's the fantasy football hitman, Mike Wright of the Fantasy Footballers. You can find him on Twitter at FFHitman. Mike, appreciate you joining me again. I know whenever I have one of the Fantasy Footballers on, the show always runs longer than I'm used to. I don't know if it's my fault or your guys' fault or just the fact that I love talking to you guys so much, but I'm definitely glad you're on with me today.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm happy to be back, and I think that you have just outed yourself for abusing our free labor guest spots. Running us long, running us into the ground.
Well, I was worried I was going to make some enemies because I brought you on during the season last year, and how do you pick, right? How do you choose between the three of you?
You did it the right way.
Of course. I was worried, though, when Andy and Jason came on that they were going to have some words for me. Luckily, they were very nice about it.
No, man. We're huge fans of you guys and your work. And look, basically everyone in this industry is awesome, and we all like working together.
It's true. It's very true. Well, like I said, we're going to preview week 5 here, like we always do. And at the end of the show, we're going to give you the players that we think are being overlooked this week. But I wanted to start today's show off by asking everybody out there what their biggest fantasy questions are after the first month of the season, right? Now that we are 4 games in. So that's where I want to begin today. I put the question out on Twitter. I got a ton of responses. I'm always humbled. I'm always so grateful by all the interaction that we get on Twitter. And when you put out a question like that, a lot of people jump all over it. It's just fantastic. But the most common question that I seem to get was teams that are trying to right the ship here after a bad start, after starting 0-4 or 1-3. So Mike, let's see if we can help him out here. At Sens Rock asks, sitting at 1-3 after the first month in a competitive league, how should we calibrate our panic? Knowing that 1-4 most likely means the end of the season, do we get creative with trades and pickups? Do we make moves for week 5 to 7, even if it projects long-term outcomes negatively? At Mike Rod 02140963 asks, Whoa. Can I still win my league at 1-3? Yes, you definitely can. I did it last year in a league. At Sean Gagne, 93 asks, what's the likelihood of making the playoffs after starting 1-3? And at Tactic 101 wants to know, it's a 2-part question here. 1, for 0-4 and 1-3 teams, should you be trading your top tier guys for more stability? Example, Mahomes for Kupp and Royce Freeman. And 2, how do you know when to cut loose on players? Example, Diggs, Juju, OJ Howard, Sony, or Mixon they mentioned. So Mike, a lot of variations of the same question there, right? Owners wondering how they can turn things around. Can they salvage their fantasy season? So do you have any tips for them?
Well, step 1 is evaluate your losses. I know we have very short-term memories in fantasy football. I mean, I lost week 2 in our league of record. I don't remember what the score was. I remember I was super mad about it, and I had a good cry, and then I moved on. But take stock of your losses. Is your team performing? Are you barely losing? Are you just running into one of the top 6 teams of the week? Like, did you pull the short straw in terms of your schedule? Because if your team is performing and you just happen to keep getting beat out by a top 6 score in your league, the rule of averages is coming in because you're going to start playing those other teams who are not scoring. So you're going to be able to rack up the victories. And there's other teams in your league who are 1-3, and they're throwing in the towel. They're not making moves. Now you have one less competitor on the waiver wire. You have one less competitor in trade negotiations. You can absolutely still make the playoffs at 1-3. You can make the playoffs starting out 0-4. And sometimes 0-5. Like you should not bail on the fantasy season because other people in your league they're already bailing because they got too scared. Don't be scared. If you're scared, you go to church. Not this, they were talking about fantasy football. This is serious business right here.
And you nailed it. There's different things that you can do here. And there's a couple things that I employ in the instances where I end up starting off slow. I like what you said, like looking at point totals as well, right? Like in my one dynasty league, I'm around the middle of the pack in a 12-team league, but I have like the second or third highest point total in that league. So I'm not worried at all. That's going to right itself over time. I just got hit with some really tough opponents there. But there are some things you can actually do. One thing that it might be a little bit sneaky, but you can trade for players that have already had their bye week. And this week it's going to be tough because there's only a couple teams that have had byes so far, right? The 49ers and the Jets are coming off bye. But if you do that, that gives you a whole extra week of value. And if you're in that kind of situation where you need to win out or you need to at least win most of your games in order to make the fantasy playoffs, don't underestimate what that extra week having that player the whole way could do. You can also, if you're going to make a trade with somebody, take a look at specifically at that opponent, take a look at the players you're giving up to them and who those players are playing the week that you go up against that team, right? So, for example, after week 1, I made a trade in my main home league where I gave up Adam Thielen and I gave up Julian Edelman. And I was playing that owner in week 4. And Adam Thielen was going up against the Bears and Julian Edelman was going up against the Bills. And I'm not going to, completely give up a ton of value in order to make that happen. But if the trade is equal, and it was, you can kind of look at that as an extra little incentive. And when I played that guy this week, well, guess what? Julian Edelman was 2 for 6, I think. Adam Thielen was 2 for 6, and Julian Edelman didn't have a big game either. So it can really help you get an extra win there, right? And that's a small thing, but you can do that. And then the other thing is buy low targets. And we talked about that on the podcast last week. On Monday's episode, I talked about players that have had tough schedules, and their schedules are going to get a little easier over the next few weeks or the next month or even beyond. So that's another thing. Easier opponents isn't everything in fantasy, but you're just trying to find ways to give yourself the best chance to win as many possible games the rest of the way.
And I love what you said about looking at the fantasy season in segments. It's, yes, technically it is a season long. We go to week 16 for the championship. I mean, you're looking at week 14 as your playoffs, but you got to buy wins right now, especially if you're that 1-3 team. You need to buy a win. You need to manufacture those. And sometimes that means perceptually losing a trade, where you go out
it's true.
And you trade for a player who the long-term outcome is probably not as great as the player you have right now, but they have an excellent matchup. Those are the types of things that you need to be looking at because you got to win. And then guess what? You get to figure it out again next week. If you made a trade like that where you kind of gave up some value, figure it out next week. It's all about living to see another day. And then the one, a little bit of an overpay for trades, but doing the 2-for-1s, the 3-for-1s, overwhelming to get a superstar is, it's a tactic that not enough people use. I mean, we all the experts, we always talk about this. I want the best player in a trade because I know what the best player does for my starting lineup, as opposed to like, oh, cool, now I have 3 good depth players. No, I want a superstar playing for me right now, and don't look at it. You're not trading 3 players for just one. You're trading 3 players, you're getting a superstar, and now you get to go to the waiver wire, and you get to pick up 2 players. Maybe you get to pick up the best quarterback streamer for next week. You get to pick up that DST for next week. But you saw it paid huge dividends for people this year. The New England Patriots. People did not want them week 1. Now, they came through. They dominated the Pittsburgh Steelers. But before the NFL season started, no one was calling for that. You didn't want to play the Patriots DST against the Steelers. But you saw how juicy the upcoming schedule was going to be for the Steelers, or for the Patriots. So a lot of people picked them up. Either they just took the lumps and played them against the Steelers, or they stashed 2 DSTs, which is, it's not always the right move, but sometimes it is. And you need to be paying attention for these little slight advantages that you can be gaining week to week by just taking a peek over the hedge. You're not everything is the next week, but you're just being a little bit of a peep in Tom to see what's going on in next week.
Love it. That's great stuff. That's all for the video version of today's podcast. Big thanks to everybody out there for all the questions. If you want to hear the rest of the Week 5 preview episode and all the wonderful insights from Mike, you can go check out the podcast on the Score app or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for watching.
Said leave on time, my baby said leave on time.